Thank you, Madam Speaker. One of my objectives in this body is to never impugn the motives of my colleagues, and I appreciate the work that's gone into this budget, and I appreciate the work of the chair of the committee that did that work, and all of my colleagues who've been involved. This is my moment to ask for a little bit more. So let me just highlight, I think that we have done some great first steps as a body and as a state to move away from what I always call a failure-based system, where we find someone who's accused of a crime, in charge of a crime, convicted of a crime, and then see if they fail or not moving forward, and it's a success-based system. And the best example I know of success-based systems are our juvenile justice system, but also our specialty courts in the adult system. And so one of the things that my proposed amendment here does is add additional funding for specialty courts, which are success-based programs. They help people work on sobriety. Judges, instead of being punishers, become life coaches. And these things can have transformative effects in people's lives. So I think that specialty courts always deserve funding, especially when in the community we see pinch points. More people want to be in these courts than can be in the courts given the available funding. So that's one part of the amendment that I hope that we'll consider. It's also true, I think, that we have to have better conversations about what we are doing when we do justice. And we have to get better at assessing risks. We have to get better at looking for what the outcomes really are of the money that we invest when we apply the justice system to our citizens. And so another part of my proposed amendment is that we apply money to a risk assessment tool for those who are lodged pre-incarceration. And that's a critical group, Madam Speaker, because these are people who haven't been convicted of anything. And it is perhaps I consider one of the greatest moral failings of our state right now, that we have a system which too often, functionally, we have a wealth test for whether or not people remain incarcerated once they've been accused of a crime. And we have to move towards risk assessments and clear-sighted risk assessments rather than wealth tests when we're looking at the pre-convicted but incarcerated population, people who get charged with a crime but have not been convicted yet. The most invasive thing that the government that we can do to our citizens is lock them up. A lot of us get really unhappy about taxes, especially this time of year, but being incarcerated is a massively more intrusive thing that the government can do to people. And of course, it often produces cascade failure. People who get locked up lose their jobs very quickly. They lose their housing, and then they wind up in a place that it's very hard to come back from. So I emphasize that part in the amendment and hope that we can consider that. The third part, of course, is also addressing people who have a hard time coming back from a difficult space, and that's particularly people who are survivors of human trafficking. These are folks who have been in abusive cycles, things that frankly look like modern-day slavery, and getting out of cycles of abuse like this, just like getting out of cycles of addiction, is hard, and it takes help from the outside. I think that we all owe it to our fellow citizens who are in these horrific situations that we do what we can to help them, and that we start, as we so often do, as my amendment proposes, with pilot programs offering services, particularly in those areas where we know that sex trafficking is happening at high levels. And so, particularly in my own community, these would be funds that we would use to help provide services for survivors, to help them break out of that, and move past that trauma and move past that abuse, and re-enter society with dignity. So I'd ask you, Madam Chair, to consider the amendment. Thank you.